Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vince Perri. I am your business broker, exit strategist, entrepreneur. 16 years, Brandon, a long time. And I'm very excited because we've got a contractor on the show, a very special contractor, because Brandon, you are the CEO of New Vision Projects. And I just love the fact that you focus on custom home building and all of those beautiful, I've seen your work, Brandon, and it is. Do people still use off the chain, or am I showing my age?
Yeah, off the chain works. Off the chain works.
All right.
I still come from that era, so I appreciate the.
So then
reference.
we're showing our age.
Yes, yeah, we were talking a little bit about that offline too, and there's like a few things that like get a little weirder as you get older.
Brandon Smith, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Please, before we really get going and rocking and rolling, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Vince, thank you so much for having me. Love the energy, man. Appreciate you. So yeah, New Vision Projects. We, like you said there, we build custom homes, renovate homes. We have a commercial division, which we're looking at sort of scaling back on that side of things after a number of years. However, we can talk about that later. But yeah, 15 years, 2010, we started New Vision Projects. My partner and I, co-founder of New Vision Projects and I, in 2010, when the Olympics came to Vancouver. So I was working for a larger construction company pretty well right out of high school. Because we can get into that story too if you want, but it was an interesting story how I got into construction. But in 2010, I had to make the decision after the world, or when I called the world, the city of Vancouver pretty well shut down all construction for 3 weeks while the world was here. And it came time to go back to work. And I had said, thank you, but no thanks. And I used that as a launch pad to start New Vision Projects.
Why did you decide that?
It was one of those things where I had seen, and not to discredit the company that I was working for. They were a great company to work with, but it was a large company. You get lost in the numbers, right? And I knew a lot of the guys that were there, and you're making pretty good money. I was working my way up the ranks, and when you start looking at the site superintendents or the foremans or whatever it is that whichever path that you wanted to go with the company, your future was going to look bright no matter what. But there was going to be a cap on that, and I never really liked that idea. I saw what these guys were putting in, and I saw where their potential was going to be, and it really was the golden handcuffs, right? That you see, and they're not necessarily a bad thing, but they did a really good job of retention. And I couldn't have bought my first house if I didn't work with them. I credit a lot of that to the fact that I did work with them and got my start in real estate because of them. Learned a lot, but I saw where my future was going to be, and I did not want that to be my future. I didn't know what my future was going to be necessarily, but I knew that I wanted to be more in control of that. So I took a risk on myself.
I think that's probably what's most important, just having the control that you want to control. And honestly, I think the scary thing about working for a company is, one of my core values a long time ago was loyalty. And it's very important to me, loyalty, but I hate to say it, but in business, there isn't any loyalty to a certain extent, because sometimes a business has to make the unfortunate, unloyal decision to let somebody go. And I never liked that part about it. And, at least when you're the boss, you don't necessarily have to worry about that part. You have other things that you have to worry about, but not that part.
You know what? I think when it comes down to loyalty, it comes down to a couple of things, right? One, as an employee of the company, you're hoping that the employee is going to be loyal to the organization, and in return, the organization is going to be loyal to the employee or whoever is on board and currently employed by the organization. But you're not necessarily, like, your loyalty there stops as soon as somebody can't deliver or the market changes, right? And that's just the reality of business. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to be a loyal support and be able to write a great letter of reference. It just means that sometimes there are things that happen in the market that are out of your control no matter what. And perfect example here, when I was working for that company, this is 2008, so 10 years before I left. In 2008, if you recall, there was a few funny things that were happening in the world, right? We were seeing banks shut down all over the states. There was a lot of money that was all of a sudden not there anymore. At home equity, right? There was all of a sudden disappeared. There was a lot of people that were let go, laid off just because of the world market. And that was the same thing here. And when I went out, it was interesting. So I really needed to buy a new vehicle. And I was doing some surveying at the time with a guy, and I was apprenticing under, and they had moved me into this position to start doing some site surveying. I worked with him for a number of months, and him and I both needed new vehicles. And I went out, and he went out that same day. We didn't know that each other, we were buying cars, but I went out, I spent like $2,500 on an old beat up Pathfinder because I was in a position where I was, you know what, I'm just going to spend a little bit of cash. It's going to get me from A to B. I wasn't driving a lot. I didn't really need a nice vehicle, but I was like, I needed a vehicle. He went out that same night, and he had bought, at that time, it was a brand new, I think it was a Volkswagen Jetta. It was sort of his dream car. He went out and bought a brand new vehicle. And we showed up the next day, and we had that conversation. I said, yeah, no, I bought a car last night. He's like, oh, so did I. And we started, we had that conversation. He laughed, and he said, you know what, at some point, you're going to have to grow up and buy a big boy car. And I said, noted. All right. That's fair enough. And I was a little jealous. I was like, yeah, maybe did I make the wrong decision? Am I worth more than the $2,500 Pathfinder that I went out and bought? That same day, that afternoon, our foreman came up to us and said, we're shutting down the job site. And he was laid off the next day. And I managed to stay on to continue working for another couple of years through the big layoffs. They ended up keeping me on. But that was an interesting point and that was really a deciding factor there too, where I saw that for the first time in an industry, seeing massive layoffs and knowing that there was really nothing that I could do about that. And I wanted some more control of that. And it was also a reminder to make sure that you're not overextending yourself if you don't have control of your outcomes. And if you're taking risks on yourself and you believe that you're going to go no matter what to do whatever it takes to get it done, then go ahead, right? To everybody. But if your livelihood is potentially at risk, you need to have either a huge amount of trust and foresight that things aren't going to happen. But as soon as you get those golden handcuffs on that we were talking about later, it becomes comfortable, but it becomes a little risky. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I love our staff. We could not build a company without them. And not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. In fact, the majority of our staff that we have on board, they were business owners at one point. And they decided, you know what, we love what we do, but we want to work with a team that's driven to work towards something great together. And we don't necessarily want to deal with all of the other stuff. But I love that because you can have the types of conversations that you want to have with business owners, and there's an understanding there. And I think that I think anybody can be a business owner, anybody can be an entrepreneur, but not everybody should. And some people are going to make their highest and best potential is being a number 2 or number 3 or number 4 in an organization, because that's where they're going to drive the most impact, right? They're not necessarily going to have the capacity to make the tough decisions and fight and get creative to make payroll sometimes. Like that stuff is going to eat them alive.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, little did you know what you were probably going to run into by going to the other side. Sometimes they say the grass is greener on the other side. But I also believe the same thing. I mean, I think that's great. I think put in the proper company in the proper position with the right amount of autonomy and freedom. I think really, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think anybody, even the entrepreneur and whatever visionary you want to call it, I think even that person, super successful, if put in the right structure, if put in the right team, could probably thrive there as well, as long as you like get out of their way and let them like be great, you know? It took me a while to realize that. I always thought like, why would anybody want to work for somebody? And it was very difficult for me to hire because I always thought it was about me and you're helping me. And no, if you do your job as an entrepreneur and as a business owner and really not only paint the picture of the vision, but have that vision shared with sort of their vision and what they want in their life. I also believe maybe take it to another level is that maybe any entrepreneur could work within a system so long as it works with them and it allows them and gives them the freedom that they want. You think?
100%. Right. So, but it really does come down to a couple of things, but the mission of the company and the capacity of the leader to actually lead, right? Because people that are coming to an organization and they are looking to grow, they are not going to do well in an environment if they're being told what to do all of the time, right? And that's where like that mentality comes in. They may have been business owners on their own at one point, so they still want a level of flexibility, of trust that they're going to get stuff done. And that's a different conversation. They're not order takers, right? Our people here, they're amazing. And all of them need to have a bit of that freedom, but they need guardrails. And in fact, they want guardrails, right? Because they don't know their potential. And so your job as a business owner is to see that potential. And like the game of Pong, right? It's like, okay, your highest and best potential is in between these two lines. And there's a tendency to like bounce back and forth. And your job as the owner is to like really harness that potential and just make sure that it stays on track. So there are guardrails that need to be put in place for people to stay focused on what they do, focused on what matters, focus on the people that they interact with, right? The culture, same thing, culture of that company that you want to build has to stay within, certainly within those lines, because as soon as you get outside of it, things just get a little hairy. But it doesn't mean that those people need to be order takers. They need their own, they have to be, disciplined on their own, but they need their own freedom to be able to make decisions.
So what's it been like having so many employees that were former business owners? What's that whole dynamic like?
It's great. Wouldn't change it for the world. When you start having conversations that you want to have that you feel that some people just won't understand, right? When we're talking about gross profit or profitability, or we're talking about certainly certain metrics in an organization, all of a sudden that lands and that becomes clear. And then it starts thinking in their mind, they're like, yeah, okay, this is stuff that I didn't know when I was running a business, but I appreciate and I want to know more. Right. And so they're continually learning, and then they feel that they're learning. So they feel that they're able to advance, and everybody wins. But it does really come down to, the mission. Are you guys aligned on making that happen? Right. So if we're looking at hiring something, it's not, hey, do you want to come and work for me? Do you want to come and serve me? Like that's the wrong attitude, in my opinion. It's, hey, we're on a mission. We want to do work for the best people with the best people. We want to, have, this is the impact that we want to have in the market. This is what we want to do. Do you want to come on board? I see you as somebody that can help contribute. Here's a spot that I see you being able to fit in and hone your skills in. Do you want to serve this mission with us?
How many employees do you have?
Right now, we have about a dozen employees. We actually scaled back after COVID. We had a number of, we changed over to more of a management model. So previously we had over 20 employees, and we were self-performing a lot of work and doing a lot of like bits and pieces and odds and sods ourselves. When COVID hit, we had a choice to make, right? Looked at the option. I took a built out organizational charts for what this company was going to look like if we scaled the way that we were operating right now. And Vince, it looked like a absolute nightmare. And the problem was, the people that were doing really well, they were doing really well, but we were limiting their potential to grow, because we were putting so much baggage and stuff that we didn't need on top of them. So for them to operate and be able to focus on the areas that they were going to be really, really good at, they were being weighed down by a lot of the stuff that they didn't necessarily want to deal with, and a lot of staff, a lot of more moving parts. So we had a big decision to make, and that decision was, what does the company that we want to build look like in the future? Who are the customers that we want to serve, and what are we really going to focus on? And we decided that we were going to focus on an exceptionally high level of management, and we made the decision to unfortunately have to lay off some people, right? And that was not. We kept everybody as long as we could until we made that decision, and I had to call every single one of those people myself and have a one-on-one conversation about why we were taking the company in the direction that we were going.
So what do you mean more of a management model? What does that exactly look like?
Yeah, so in that case, we had the way that we were operating before. We had a lot of procedures, but they were built around mostly hours produced, and it was built around a lot of our staff, our carpenters, our laborers that we had on our team. And when we decided to pivot, we said, okay, well, let's look at this from a different angle, right? What if we spent more time onboarding really great subcontractors, right? In the case, like one of the issues that you run into when you have that many staff is your billable hours, they tend to go down, because if you're working from project to project and you're not on the same place, every day, or maybe you have 3 guys over here for a week, or you have 2 guys over here, and you're constantly battling, balancing support and teams and moving them around, or sometimes you're just have guys working in the shop to keep them busy. And that was a big thing, right? Was moving them around, or we'd have delays on projects because our subcontractors weren't delivering on time and whatever. So now I have to make the call and say, hey, we have to keep you at home, or we have made the decision to just kind of keep the guys busy for a while. And that was a big struggle. We were talking offline, right? I love people to a fault. And I really do care about them. And back to that, that conversation of loyalty that we were talking about, right? You have that loyalty to make payroll every single week. And so you end up taking on projects that that aren't necessarily good for the company, just to keep guys busy, right? So you're looking around, and if you're doing sales, you're kind of picking stuff up and picking up everything that you possibly can, because there's a bit of labor over there, there's a bit of labor over there, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, well, this can keep these guys busy for a couple of days, go over here, and this can keep the guys busy. It just wasn't sustainable. So we had to hone in on what we were going to do, and that came down to, what, we are going to become the best project management company that we possibly can. So we do have a couple of carpenters on staff, but mainly project managers and site supers that are there monitoring our CRM system. We are doing an excellent job with estimating. We've rebuilt out all of our operating procedures, our customer experience, like everything, Vince, is dialed. And there's always room for improvement. I just posted a video today on Instagram about what we do here, and the importance of retrospect and the importance of reviewing each project after they're completed. And not enough people do that.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't sit down, debrief, but we go over everything. We go over total revenue. What was that versus compared revenue versus actual revenue? Go over compared hours versus actual hours. Go over material versus actual material, proposed subcontract, all the variable costs. We run through the numbers, but we also do a breakdown of we do a customer summary. Right. So we review who were the customers, what was it about them that was great, what was it about them that maybe made things a bit of a struggle. We go through our subcontractors on the back end of it, and we highlight who did really well, who really stood out, who was a real team player, and who maybe we considered either having conversation with or not working again. Staff, right? Which one of our staff really played a huge part in making that a success. And, we talk about schedule, the estimate, deficiencies, right? We have a checklist of things that we go over and we communicate on at the end of each project. And that's because we want to be able to make incremental changes or incremental improvements on every single project, because we know that we are only as good as our last at bat. And we want to just know, like, every project we are starting with a new customer that know us probably from, it was either referral or Instagram, but they don't really know us. They've never worked with us before. And what we do is it's a huge decision and a huge financial commitment for most of our clients. Most of our clients don't have $500,000 or $1.5 million or $2 million that they're going to spend at the drop of a hat. So this is a big decision. So we need to make sure that process is exceptional.
You do 100% custom? Everything you do is custom homes?
Well, custom homes, we do renovations as well.
Yeah, right. You do custom home building and custom renovation, but everything is custom and residential.
Everything is custom and residential. Yeah.
So what is the typical process? Because I'm assuming there's drawings involved, there's architects involved, there's engineers involved, then there's the laborers, then there's it seems like there's a lot. What is the 30,000 foot view process of someone wanting to just renovate the shit out of their house?
Cool.
To like something super crafty and unique.
Yeah. So Vince, you come to me, you say, you know what? We have our home here. We want to gut the home. We want to add an additional, bedroom, bathroom, story on top of your house, whatever that is. We don't know where to start. Cool. All right. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be meeting with you first of all. And at our first consultation, we are going to go over, first of all, is this possible? We're going to talk kind of high level budget, right? What have previous people spent on a renovation of this size? Does it make sense to renovate? Maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe it makes sense to sell, or maybe it makes sense to tear down and build. But let's assume that it makes sense for you to renovate, and we can come up with a floor plan of something that's going to work. Well, that's going to be a huge amount of work in the pre-construction phases, right? So we put a lot of emphasis on the pre-construction phases of any project. Our projects are pretty project management heavy before the project even gets off the ground, right? So in that case, we're going to put together a budget and a general scope of work, right? So at least this is going to give you the Coles notes of what the target budget is. We call it a class D or a class C budget, depending on the amount of information that we have.
This is still before plans and drawings and all that
Totally.
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before plans and drawings, right? And if a customer comes to us and they have a rough set of plans, then we still go through the steps. It just means that we have more information, so we can provide a little more detail and feedback at that point. If somebody decides that they want to take next steps, then we have a pre-construction service agreement that we sign them into. So this is an initial commitment where it says you're not legally obligated to move forward with construction if something happens before we get there. But in good faith, this is our intention. We're going to be putting forward a lot of work. You're going to be putting forward a chunk of money to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. But things do change, because pre-construction, it can be 3 months, 6 months, a year out before we actually start construction. So things happen, right? People decide they want to list their house and they want to move, or they have somebody gets laid off at work. Situations change, but still, we want to make sure that pre-construction process, everything is dialed in. That's when we would onboard design. We start designing, and that comes with a general space plan, floor plan, concept drawings, etc. Once we get to architectural drawings and we get a little further along, we then take that bracketed budget that we've started with and we narrow that budget. And we usually have a few broken down costs as well. But at least what this does is it keeps budget alignment on track. Because what we don't want to do is say, hey, we've budgeted $750,000 for this renovation in these early stages, and then it goes through design and it comes back and all of a sudden now it's 1.2 million, and you say, Jesus, where did this other $500,000 come from? And then we're playing, that game back and forth. We never want that to happen. 100% of the time it catches somebody off guard. So those early stages, like that's really when you have to start building the relationship with your clients, and you need to make sure that that phase is really, really smooth. So a lot of our processes that we built are around that pre-construction phase. Once it's in construction, it's pretty simple if you've done the pre-construction and the planning part correctly.
Who handles a pre-construction phase? Is it a salesperson? Because typically I've noticed in some of the construction businesses, home services, stuff like that, the estimator is kind of the sales guy because is that how it works with you guys?
Not with us.
Okay.
No.
How does it work?
So what you're going to get, and this is from experience, right? We've had a number of estimates, and depending on your model, you can do it a number of different ways. The biggest issue that you're going to find when you bring on an estimator, if they're going to take that right to construction contract and there's no coordination with a project manager or anything before, it's going to be a really difficult thing to hand off. And what we ran into when we were doing that, bringing on a full-time estimator specifically for those projects, we call them an estimator, and that was sort of their role. But then when it got into the nitty-gritty, because we were really bonusing our project managers on the outcome and the production of how well the project was going, there was a lack of accountability there, because the project manager would say, "Hey, what did you account for the repair of, this outside wall?" And he would say, I didn't know that we had to do that. I didn't realize that was, part of the construction thing, because I'm not really a construction guy. I'm just good at like putting together some numbers on paper. But when we're talking about custom, especially when we're talking about renovations of a larger scale, your construction knowledge needs to be pretty dialed. So what we ended up doing is we have, myself or somebody else will go out and they will meet with the clients, and they're going to put together that initial budget, right? That starts as soon as they sign into pre-construction. That account gets handed over to the project manager that is going to be seeing the project through from permitting stages right through to deficiency and warranty stages. So he has a lot of those conversations that happen in pre-construction. There's a lot of gold in there, right? There's a lot of information that is transferred that maybe it doesn't get documented, but you're like, the project manager that's going to be there is going to be really building their relationship with that client. And estimating is a project management discipline. So when the project managers now started taking on doing the final estimating, that gives them the flexibility and the accountability to hire on the subcontractors that they want, right? So you don't have the estimator that's going out and hiring all of these companies that the project manager has to work with. And maybe they don't want to work with them. Maybe they don't have a great relationship with them. But at that point, the project manager can't go back to the estimator and say, look, like, what are we gonna do here? You hired this company that clearly can't deliver on the standards that we expect them to, and now the project manager is stuck dealing with a company that they don't want to work with. So we made that decision, and when we talk about a high level of management, really training our project managers to understand estimating, to understand the numbers that they're working with, to understand some aspect of sales and customer service and everything that's going to be implied in those early stages, more so than just understanding construction. And those are the people that we hire, because there's nothing more important. Well, there's, I think, a few things more important, but when it comes to project success, having that accountability, making sure that there's no out. Like, we're talking about real people and we're talking about real money. And that is something that needs to be taken very seriously. It's because if you're handing over, most people, when they're looking to build or renovate a house, are trusting you or trusting the builder with what is probably the largest asset that they have ever owned and that probably will ever own. And that cannot be taken lightly. And so many people take that way too lightly. So we handed that over to the project managers, and they will oversee that. And then, I still to this day review the final budgets before they go out, walk through. The client or the project managers are going to walk me through everything that they put together, just so it's another set of eyes on things. And then we go and we present that to the customer.
So the project manager also does the estimate?
The detailed estimating, and they're the ones that bring on, they hire out, they tender out the project to other subcontractors.
Right.
So they're making the decisions of the plumbers, the electricians, the drywallers that they want on their project, because they have to manage the project, which means that they have to manage those companies, which means that they have to manage those people and those personalities.
How many project managers do you guys have?
We have 3 full-time project managers. We have 3 site supers that work with them, and we have a handful of different carpenters as well.
And the subcontractors, the list of subcontractors is there just like a general list that you guys have for the company, or does each project manager sort of have their own crew, have their own people that they like, know, and trust?
Yeah, so great question. We have in our CRM system, we and subcontractors, when they started playing a much bigger part in everything that we did, we have to treat them as if they're part of they understand our systems, they understand our company, they understand our inner workings as well. So one thing that we didn't have early on is a subcontractor agreement, right? We didn't have any sort of master service agreement that says, hey, these are, this is the code of ethics that you're going to abide by. It's basically 3 pages that just says you're going to be a professional, you're not going to be an asshole, you're not going to talk to our customers in a poor way, you're going to charge what you say you're going to charge, you're going to show up when you say you're going to show up, and you're going to do the best of, to the best of your ability to stay on schedule. That's pretty much it. But that alone was enough.
Most contractors don't do that.
Most contractors don't do that. So if you are willing and on board to committing to being a professional, then we will put you into our system. And that means that you're a qualified subcontractor to work with us. But that alone was enough to filter out a lot of people that had no interest in signing any such agreement. But what's funny is they don't want to sign that agreement when they are very, very busy and they have a ton of work, on their own. But as soon as things slow down, because a lot of trades companies, they work on word of mouth, or something dries up. They don't spend a lot of money on marketing. They don't do a lot of marketing. They're not involved in the community. They don't do a lot of. They're just used to work coming their way no matter what. But as soon as that dries up or something happens, then you get those calls, right? You get those calls from subcontractors that all of a sudden now are willing and ready to do whatever it takes to get on board your list.
Do you have in-house architects as well, or no?
No,
that
not
you
currently.
sub that out?
Yeah, we subcontract that out.
Gotcha. And these are custom home building renovations. Like, we're talking high-end clients, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. What's that like? How's that different than anything else? Like, I would assume that could be pretty complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at them as clients now. They certainly have a lot of them have big personalities, but I tell you, like they're most of our clients are wonderful to work with.
What's your ideal customer avatar? Do you have one, like, as far as revenue and all that stuff?
Totally, yeah. On the home renovation side, our sort of target revenue there, or our the one sort of our wheelhouse that we get the most of, that we know we can execute on in our sleep, is between $300,000 and $550,000. Couple is
combined household income.
Sorry, no, that was the average size of the project.
No, I'm talking about the ideal customer. Like what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Ideal customer. So yeah, we're looking at about a $300,000 on average minimum household income.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and generally working professionals, and we've had a lot of success with lawyers, believe it or not, as well. Like we have, which some people would think, hey, you don't never work for lawyers, but we've worked with a lot of lawyers, and a lot of the lawyers that we've worked with have just been so great to, such great as customers. So it's funny. All customers have, different backgrounds and different philosophies, but whereas I think they just get used to being like hated on all day. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, they're just like, yeah, we want somebody that, we want to be nice to people. We don't want to be a scary person. And anyways, yeah, I love the lawyers we've been able to work for. Lawyers
are like what you were saying about the subcontractors. You think you don't need them, but when you need them, you need them.
Yeah. Yeah. I have, all walks of life, right? Like we're talking about some of the best customers that we've worked with. They are entrepreneurs. Some of them are, have been teachers, or one of them has been a teacher, and they're just all hearts. I don't have necessarily a profession that has to that we lay out. There's generally a similar thread in which one of the homeowners is usually a business owner of their own or a partner in an organization. But you never know. I don't like to judge a book by its cover. The types of projects, though, we do have a decision-making box, if you will, right? So what I call it is a job risk indicator. And I built it out in the job risk indicator. It goes through five different checkpoints. And I built this out years and years ago, and it started out on a dining room table with a bunch of sticky notes. It's like, what is the decision-making factor for the types of projects that we want to take on? So 5 key things were: step one is they understand and agree with our process. Number 2 was that it was an average or our ideal job type, our ideal average job size, an ideal timeline, and an ideal location. So if it meets all 5 of those, then it is a yes. If it meets number 1, they agree with our process and any combination of 3 of those, we say yes. If they agree with our process and any combination of 2 of those, maybe it's not the ideal location or the ideal timeline. But the next question that we have to ask is that going to tie up management resources? And if that is going to tie up management resources, which are our most valuable asset, then no, we cannot take that on. Anything less than that, even if they agree on our process, but it only meets one of those other requirements, we do not take it on. And finally, if they do not understand and agree with our process, we do not take it on.
And who makes that decision? Is it the project manager and whoever it is that goes? No, does the project manager get assigned after the decision's been made?
Project manager usually has say in it. It's not as structured as that, but usually if there's going to be new opportunities, then we have what we call a sales production cross committee meeting, right? So if there's new projects that are coming up that are being introduced, that new customer is introduced, and that's actually where we break down. We have a customer profile, so we're able to highlight and go through with the project managers the type of person that they are. Right, here's the scope. First of all, the scope of work that we're looking at, rough budget, type of contract that they work on, whether it's going to be a fixed cost or a cost plus. Usually they have a preference of contract. Any specific risks that we have, and then any pertinent details. So we go through that as a checklist with at high level with the project managers before we decide, are we going to take next steps with this client. So they get I don't remember your first question there, but that was where I was going. So they have some say for sure as to whether or not this project is going to be too risky, or whether or not it's a bad idea, and that's just a safety net. But typically, they will then be assigned and they get involved in the project once we've signed them into pre-construction.
What's the gross margin goal that you're looking for on a job?
Yeah, so with renovations, you're looking for about 30% is kind of always the goal, somewhere around there. For smaller projects, smaller renovation contractors, you're going to be looking at sort of 35%. This is going to be for kitchen renovation, sort of maybe a main floor renovation. When you start getting into larger scale renovations, gross profit, especially when you're running a management model, the gross profit, it does end up starting to drop a bit. So if you're looking to increase your margins, then you start looking at self-performing more work. But you decide on which challenge you're willing to solve.
It's so tight. It's so tight in construction, man.
Yeah, well, it can be, right?
And you're doing well with 30 to 35%. You're good. You're on point. A lot of these guys are at 20%, 25% if they're lucky.
Yeah, for sure. And that's that is sort of the issue. And a lot of contractors, and they don't really understand their numbers, but it's really up to, and that's why as a project manager getting involved early, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to be charging anymore, but because we put in the work up front to make sure that this is going to be executed well, we have the capacity and the ability to get projects completed faster, to get them done more efficiently, because we're eliminating a huge amount of friction that doesn't need to be there.
And how involved are you still? How involved are you in the day to day and the decision making on whether or not is it you and your partner that ultimately make the decision? I know I kind of asked that question before. It was more towards the project management, but is it mainly you guys that are making the ultimate decision on the jobs that you take on?
On the types of projects we take on?
And how many do you actually take on per year?
Yeah, so we take on generally between 16 and 22 projects a year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's not a lot of projects. And I talk to a lot of guys that are, they're electrical contractors, plumbing contractors,
16 to 20 a day.
Companies. And yeah, they're like, man, yeah, we do 6,000 jobs a year. Like I would do anything to take on just 16 projects a year. But they all come with their challenges, right? So that's every industry. I think the grass looks greener on any side.
No, and you're super boutique, and that's what you are, and I think that's great.
It is, but it is also scalable, right? But that's where marketing that is where, and when I say marketing, I'm not necessarily meaning throwing money at meta ads, but that's where team culture, like majority of our work comes from. It comes from people knowing that we're in the community, right? You're distributing, like when you're talking about this particular business and you're looking at going deep versus wide, then you have to go deep before you go wide, in my opinion. Otherwise, you don't get that brand awareness, right? Marketing makes people aware, but brand is really what people are going to stick around for, right? Marketing is going to get your attention, but brand is what they're going to really stick around for. And
how your community looks at your brand is very important in the selling of a business.
Absolutely.
I'm a big part of that stuff.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I spend very little time in the day-to-day operations of our company. In fact, I go to job sites, but I really go there to chat with the guys, film some video for content. But as soon as I walk onto a job site at this point, I start getting, a number of questions because people want to stop and talk, and I am not going to step on the toes of our project managers.
Good.
So I'm never going to be able to provide advice for something that a subcontractor should do because I don't know the conversations that have been had previously.
And what's the sales process like? Is all your leads coming from social media and just website stuff like that, or do you have any kind of outbound sales going?
Yeah, so outbound sales, I still do a lot of the outbound sales myself, right? Man, I come from a time early on in entrepreneurship where we started this company where there wasn't much money, and the way that I knew how to get business really was go and knock on doors. Go and knock on doors and, get involved in the community. There was, this is before social media was a thing. So you'd advertise in the newspaper here and there, but it was getting involved in the community. We built on the weekends, my business partner and I should preface my business partner, he's exited out of the business, the operating company down here about 8 years ago now for the most part. And because we had an opportunity to move him out of town to take on doing some land development on our own. So that's what he's focusing on right now is we're purchasing property, subdividing, and doing the land development, bringing in the services, building the spec homes, selling those spec homes. But the early days, when it was him and I, on the weekends, evenings, we built a beautiful 2-story playhouse. Right. This was an obnoxiously luxury playhouse that we put on top of a flat deck trailer. We built that and we towed it around town for 6 months. And we hit the farmers markets, we hit different local events, and we worked with the local hospital here as a lottery. So everywhere we went, we put people buy tickets to lottery this thing off, and we raised like $30,000 for the hospital on this because we built this playhouse.
Like for kids?
Yeah, it was like a kids playhouse, little 2-story playhouse. It looked like a big red barn. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
What that did was we didn't have money for marketing, but we had time, right, early on. And so there was these early guerrilla marketing tactics that I knew of and fell in love with. And still to this day, we have an aspect of that, right? We have we start a project. Our site supers on their they start a project and they go, and we have door hangers that go around, and you have to go and knock on the doors personally and introduce yourself to the neighbors. The 3 houses across the street from you, the 2 houses beside you, where you're working. Hey, how you doing? My name is so and so. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to be doing some work here for the next 6-7 months. Just wanted to give you my card. If there's anything going on, please let us know. Just wanted to give you a direct line. Sometimes renovations, people can park in places that they, aren't necessarily desirable, or sometimes there's a mess that's left. And if there's anything that comes up, we just wanted to give you our card. But yeah, do you have any questions? And that is a great way, just like that very simple thing, to build a relationship with other people in there. And then all of a sudden I can't tell you how many times we've been invited into people's homes. Oh, hey, do you mind stopping by later in the week? Cause actually I want to take a look at, my kitchen and have a conversation with you. And that stuff still works.
Was it always custom home building? Has that always been the business model, or did you start with maybe new construction or something else, maybe a lower tier of a customer? Has it shifted to this? Is this where you're always going to go? So I want to start from past to present, and then I want to go from present to plans.
Cool. So yeah, early on, man.
And I want I'm asking a lot of these questions because I want the home service to contractor to watch this and just get a good idea of sort of how it works in the background of your successful company.
Yeah, I'm an open book. So we had the company that I was working for previously was a commercial construction company. So that was where I cut my teeth. I was hired on at the age of 17, so I just graduated high school. I was going through just a real funk in life. I had, at early stages, 14, 15, I was told I had a learning disability, and that was that really sat with me, right? This is high school counselor saying, hey, ADD was a big buzzword back then, and luckily there was some pills for that. And here, let's just give him. He has a learning disability, so let's give him extra time and space to do, to do more homework and whatever. And I went through a real deep funk at that time because I had been labeled with this disability, and that's what I believed myself to have. I went. Got my first job at McDonald's at the age of 15. I actually went around, handed out resumes because I always wanted to work. My parents had split up at about that same time. And I went around and I got hired on at 14, but I couldn't actually start working there until I was 15. I didn't make it past 3 months. I was fired pretty quickly from McDonald's. I wasn't McDonald's team material. And I had to go back and tell my mom. I remember when I got hired on, my mom was super proud because I had gotten this job at a young age, and she had told her friends, so, Brandon's out there, he's working, he's handing out resumes, he's got this. And I had to go home. And I remember walking home from McDonald's and telling her, what's my mom going to think? And I had to go home and tell her I got fired. And I love my mother to death. It's great. But there was that time, that half a second where she was like, oh, fuck. I feel like I messed up as a parent, right? This is my fault. My son can't even make it at McDonald's. Anyways, fast forward.
Everybody always says you don't want to end up at McDonald's.
Yeah, and I couldn't even cut at McDonald's. So if I can't make it here, I'm definitely not going to make it at McDonald's. It's funny, actually. One of my good friends, he owns a couple of McDonald's down the street. We talk about it all the time. But then I got a job flipping pizzas and making pizzas and delivering pizzas, and that was great. I made a career there for a couple of years. The pizza place brought me in. Shout out Little Caesars. And then my mom had hot and ready. Yeah, you got it. My mom's house burnt down when I was about that age. I was 17. Her house burnt down, and she moved into a rental home, a basement suite there. And I had helped her move some stuff in, and I was helping her move. And the owner of the house was a recruiter for a company, a large commercial construction company. We started chatting, and he said, what, we need some help. Have you ever thought about construction? And I said, I have actually, a little bit. I'd done some landscaping. And so anyways, I got asked to be on come out try out, come out as a laborer. So I showed up, pushing a broom. I remember my first huge job site. I had no idea what I was doing. It was super intimidating. Sitting in the lunchroom with all these guys that were, long-term, pretty like rough and gruff construction guys downtown Vancouver, way out of my league. I had no idea what was going on. But I pushed a broom for a few months, and then they gave me a squeegee so that I could push the water off of the concrete slabs so the framers could come and, snap their chalk lines and do their layout and everything else. And then I was asked about 4 months into working there, or 5 months into working there, have I ever considered an apprenticeship? I didn't even know what that word was. I had no idea. And I said, kind of what is that? And somebody had explained it to me. And this was the guy that I was working with, the project manager at the time, or site foreman at the time. And I immediately said yes, like, yeah, that sounds great. And I went home and I told my mom, and that was awesome. Like, somebody had seen some potential in me for the first time in a long time. And that was amazing. And I wasn't going to let that go. I was like, this was a win. This was a win for me. So I stuck with that company, and I worked with them, and very quickly started working on, working up the ranks, and they started believing in me more and more and more.
But your company, was it always new construction? I mean, was it always custom that you wanted to do? That was like the goal when you started the company?
That was what I liked. Yeah. When we started the company, that was what I was interested in. But to answer your original question, when going from commercial construction into residential construction was very, very different, right? Because you can be a lifelong carpenter, a lifelong construction guy, but you, on commercial projects, and we're talking, big projects, stadiums, casinos, that type of thing, and hotels. But you're not going to know how to build a house. You're going to think you're going to know how to build a house because you think that that's going to be easier. But building a home is complex. There's a lot of complexity to it.
Yeah, and you're direct to consumer. You're direct to the homeowner. And how much of how much of your business is reconstruction and new home builds?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, I'll just preface that question. I won't forget your question there. About 3 years ago, we brought on a commercial management firm. And so we had acquired, which means
nice.
we brought on the owner of a company that we had done some work for, and a site super, and we had decided we started doing more and more commercial projects, which is great. And I do love commercial construction. I really, really do. But we brought them on, built out, a lot of tenant improvements, restaurants. We just finished a $2.5 million brewery. It's absolutely beautiful, stunning, love it. One of the challenges was that each one of those businesses needs to be treated with its own type of systems. It needs its own avatar. There's not a lot of overlap there that you can do really, really well. And we decided the commercial side of things we can do really, really well, but not at the scale that we wanted to. Whereas the residential side, we knew that we were going to be able to get, one thing, we get deposits up front. So our clients that we work with are paying us up front, and then we produce the work. So we're able to collect cash, whereas the commercial projects, for the most part, right, you're bankrolling the project.
Why?
A lot of the
Why
time.
Can't they pay up front?
It's typically the type of contracts that they work on. A lot of them don't provide deposits.
Even the smaller businesses?
Some of the smaller private businesses we do, but even the brewery is, we're working with developers out there that are building the brewery, and they don't pay deposits. So they have, typically like net 60 terms. And so you're pushing out your receivables, you're pushing out your payables, on the top of that. And then you have subcontractors that are coming after you for money, and, they're all on board. You push out their terms too, but it's not great for building relationships.
No, that's the biggest complaint I hear, especially from the subs. But the GCs, they're just like, what do you want to do? I can't. If I haven't got money, how am I going to pay them money? It's just like a whole back and forth.
Yeah, and I never want to be that. And my heart has, for a long, long time has been in the residential sector.
Do you still have the commercial division?
We do, yes. Okay. Yeah, but we are in the process of winding that down.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's
Yeah.
called a strategic acquisition, by the way. that you guys
Strategic
made.
acquisition. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Not a bad thing. I mean, yeah, at least you gave it a shot. So, original question, new
Oh,
builds.
percentage. Yeah, percentage. So right now, about 60% of the work that we do is home renovations, and about 40% of what we do is new home construction. So that does vary from year to year, depending on the market. If you know, and a lot of times there are markets where people are looking to renovate their homes more, depending on what interest rates do, depending on what type of equity they have, depending on what real estate happens or what's going on in the real estate market. But we have, you know, right now we're seeing a lot more renovations, a lot more inquiries for home renovations because people are looking for somewhere safe to, you know, to put their money. They don't know what they're going to be doing. They don't really want to stretch themselves to necessarily build a new home if they have a decent structure there. So that's always the question: is what, you know, what makes sense for us, and do we have a, you know, do we actually have a renovation project here, or does it make sense to tear it down and build it? And you know, here in the, I don't know about where you are, but here we have a lot of inventory, right? A lot of real estate right now is pretty slow. There's not a lot moving. We have a lot of inventory on the market. Pre-sales for things like condos, townhomes are way down, which is usually a sign that people are going to be interested in doing renovations, and there's going to be less new homes that are going to be built.
Sounds like you guys are doing a hell of a job building this company. So what's the plan to scale? Because you mentioned scaling. What's the plan to scale with the current business model, with the current customers, with the current structural systems and operations that you have in place? Seems like you got a good team. Seems like you've got a good reputation in the community. How do you scale from here?
Million roofs over million heads. How do we do that? That's the plan. That's the goal. That's the target. So we continue on what we're doing at scale, but that starts with, first of all, leads, right? That starts with bringing in first of all work. Leads and sales is the lifeblood and oxygen of anything that you're going to be doing.
How many projects can a project manager handle?
Typically, depending on the size of the project and the location,
You got to have a number, right? A give or take number.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
about 2 to 4 projects, and then they'll have 2 to 3 projects in pre-construction, but ongoing in construction, there's going to be overlapping times, and we find that between 2 to 4 projects is usually 4 sort of on the high end for the types of projects that we handle. Right, if you're doing smaller renovations, then
Right.
you know, project managers are able to take on 6, 7, 8 projects at a time. But for the type of projects that we take on, typically 2 to 4 projects.
And you like this current business model with the sort of management structure, with the way it is to scale to the next level? Is this what you're going to stick with?
For this business, it's a very scalable model.
Nice.
100%. Like the procedures, I'm happy to share our entire playbook with anybody that's interested.
Nice.
Is very, very scalable. As long as there is, one, you have the sales and the leads coming in, so then that becomes a marketing and media strategy, and 2, you have the people behind you that can actually do the work, which is why you'll see content that I put out about how much we need people in the trades industry, right? We need people that are going to be interested. We have a lot of building to do, and we need great people to be involved. And we're seeing, we are seeing tradespeople, but all of a sudden kind of kick back up again, which is a really, really good sign, but it's still not enough. And people, like, there's so many different avenues that you can go in construction and in trades. But for the first time in a long time, people are really realizing, like, man, I shouldn't say the first time, but right now in this world of AI, in this world of technology that's moving at such a rapid pace, people are seeing, man, there's a lot of people retiring. There's a lot of opportunity to get our hands dirty, to learn new skills, to be able to serve great people and continue on in the trades. And so I'm really excited for the future. The future looks bright.
Now, I think your social, your brand, your awareness that you have a good, strong reputation in your community definitely outpowers what I'm about to ask you. But the only thing that you're missing, I would say, is some kind of recurring revenue. Have you thought about any kind of recurring revenue models that you could implement into your business?
100%. And that's that's what. So we have a few different things, right? So the longer term play, what we do, and what the New Vision projects here, what we're building is a vehicle for these next steps. So what we are able to do is continue to scale this business. But what I'm looking to do is scale out of my time. The company that we're able to build and the way that we're going to be able to put a million roofs over a million heads is working with other business owners. So strategic acquisitions of other.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, strategic acquisitions of other
that already has a
services
recurring
businesses.
revenue model.
Yeah, and we understand so many different trades and home service businesses, and I love that. I love the I love the plumbing contractors, HVAC, window cleaning, junk removal, all of that. Love that. We spend that's where I spend a lot of my time talking to those business owners, and the New Vision projects on my end will become a smaller piece of what I do. And the acquisition strategy of building the portfolio companies, and that's what we're going to be. Those are the next steps, is bringing on the great people where the business becomes or the acquisition company becomes the business, and the growth and potential of everybody in the business, the upside that they have is based on how well all of these other companies perform, and working with every single one of these companies that we bring on to work with us to make sure that they are growing their business and that they have the right people and that they are being coached in the way that they need to be, so that they can free up their time, hire the people that they need to hire, focus on what they do best, and know that they have that back end strategy and that back end support behind them.
That's the play. I definitely think that's the play, because you've got a well-oiled machine. Obviously, right? I'm sure there's their days, right? But, from what you've been telling me today, you've got strong profit margins. You've got beautiful systems and operations in place. You've got it broken down very strategically. You've got a hell of a team, which is fantastic. Looks really well from the outside. Again, you've got the community presence and the positive outlook. And yeah, if you can't, or if for some reason you struggle or whatever it is to really implement a good recurring revenue model, I think that's a very good teaching moment for anyone who's struggling to try to figure stuff out. There is a power in a strategic acquisition of, just obviously if you have the means to do it, you have to be successful yourself. You have to implement all these things yourself, where there are businesses that do it every day. They roll up, right? And it doesn't have to be looked at as a down thing, as a bad thing, but you could always acquire a business that already has a strength or a particular, I always compare it to, like, if you're buying tools, or if you're buying materials, you could ultimately buy the manufacturing company that creates the materials that you want. That's a great strategic buy as well. And I think that's definitely the play. And I think that's awesome. That's going to be great.
We've talked about it a number of times. Why don't you start a roofing company? Why don't you start a painting company? Why don't you, start a landscaping company or a maintenance, a property service business? And that's like a natural next step for a lot of people, a lot of contractors, a lot of home service businesses, is to start another business. For me, I want to
just don't reinvent the wheel.
For me, I like the acquisition, the acquisition model, and just being able to skip a lot of those steps that you would be looking at if you were to greenfield a brand new business from nothing. And also with that comes great people. So be very strategic around the businesses, but also the people that we acquire.
Especially if they align with your values and it just all sort of clicks and it just like fits. I mean, there's a lot of potential with that. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
That's the longer term vision here that we're working with. And I spent a couple of days down at acquisition.com at the Layla and Alex Hormozy headquarters down there, and it was very cool to see how they value and look at businesses when they're looking at acquiring them as well and scoring them. And the thing that I learned was most business owners, 99% of business owners, overvalue what somebody is willing to pay for their company.
100%.
Maybe 100%.
I deal with it every day.
Fair enough. Well, you would know, but that was, one thing. But what was interesting was when you look at what it is that they how they score the businesses that they're looking at acquiring, it makes you think, okay, well, which of those areas are we vulnerable in? Which of those areas all of a sudden makes your business not so saleable?
And instead of implementing and starting from scratch and reinventing the wheel, there's always the option of actually acquiring a business that's already done it successfully.
Yes. Yeah.
Brandon, thanks so much for coming on, man. You are the man. You've got a very nice thing going. I'm very impressed by it. I hope you didn't feel like I was too intrusive with some of my questions, but my thought process was another contractor, home services company trying to figure shit out and hoping that with your information that maybe they've got I know they got something.
Yeah. Whatever. I didn't know where you wanted to go with it. If you wanted to go, hey, we're going deep in construction and processes, if we were going to go mindset, entrepreneurship, wellness, whatever that was going to be. But yeah, man, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate that very, very much.
And we'll put all your information below and all your emails and your website and Instagram and social and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, there we are. Right, you can find me at New Vision Projects on Instagram is a great spot. Check out the podcast, the Open Concept Podcast with Brandon Smith. Check it out on wherever it is that you listen or watch your podcast for more great information. We interview some really great people, man. So
including me, myself as well.
Including you. Yeah.
Cool.
Love it.
All right, Brandon. Thanks so much, man.
Appreciate you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.